been kind of a meeting where all of the governments that are really committed to kind of addressing extreme inequality across the world have been in the same room with all of the kind of academic experts who've done work over kind of over the last few decades, kind of to bring this issue to the fore. And it hasn't ever been the case before that the kind of idea of setting up an international panel to deal with this problem has been advanced to this extent. So you're really present here today at a pretty historic event, and kind of from Wits University side, we're really thrilled to have you here. I'm now going to pass on to our Vice Chancellor to do the official welcome. I'll ask you to please kind of allow one indulgence kind of for the Vice Chancellor. Kind of, as you know, kind of the President is going to address us today. Kind of in terms of our protocol at the university, when the head of state comes to our university, he has to be met by the head of our institution, who is the Vice Chancellor. So as soon as he's delivered his address, I'd request that you allow us to excuse the Vice Chancellor so that he can head off to come to meet and welcome the President. So with that, let me pass it on to the Vice Chancellor.
Thank you, Program Director. Representing the government representation of the Republic of South Africa, and I recognize the Director General of Foreign Affairs, Excellencies, Ambassadors, and High Commissioners, representatives from Oxfam, joining us online who unfortunately couldn't make it in person today, is Nobel laureate Professor Joseph Stiglitz, distinguished guests, colleagues, partners, and friends. Welcome to the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. It's indeed a privilege to host you today on this consultative meeting towards the establishment of the International Panel on Inequality here at the University of the Witwatersrand, commonly known as WITS. It's got a long name. This university, as the name suggests, is located in Johannesburg, the most complex urban conurbation, which is a globally connected city of industry, commerce, culture, and ideas, and has been at the heart of South Africa's industrialization over the last 100 years. However, it's also a city that reflects, in concentrated form, the historical and contemporary drivers of inequality that this process that you are gathered for seeks to address. For us at WITS, this is the context in which we work. It shapes the questions we ask, intellectual questions that we ask, the academic projects we choose to prioritize and prosecute. Of course, in this country, inequality is not abstract, it is real. Our institutions, including universities, therefore, have been shaped by that historical trajectory. However, at this university, we have picked up the cudgels to take on these challenges. In my area of work, which is largely in the area of science and innovation, it does manifest itself through digital concentration. That in the era of this technological exponential, it is largely concentrated in a few areas in the world. You can tell that with artificial intelligence, there is a high level of concentration and inequality in its most clear manifestations. It is in that regard that WITS has taken up the initiative to be at the heart of forming the largest one of the largest institute for artificial intelligence, the Machine Intelligence and Neural Discovery Institute, that will seek to address challenges of AI from the vantage point of Johannesburg and South Africa and broadly the African continent. We are leading the initiative in the next emerging technology that will actually disrupt even kind of hypercharged AI, as I call it. No one knows about it yet, but some of you might do. The quantum explosion that we don't know about. So it is a technology in the future. We always joke as physicists that quantum technologies and quantum computing is a physicist's dream, but in 10 years' time, when it's been rolled out, whenever in the future, it will be an engineer's nightmare when it becomes launched to scale. And Africa cannot be caught in the backwash of that historical movement. So therefore, each and every institution has to be part of it. So along with the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation in South Africa, we have launched the South African Quantum Technology Initiative to ensure that you don't fall behind with these technologies, to address that global inequality, not only in terms of commerce, finance, because these things will manifest themselves financially as well. So these are significant areas of focus that shape part of our research agenda that informs key partnerships and contributes to the role we seek to play. At the same time, we do projects that do not only remain at VETS, as they connect outwards through research partnerships, collaborative networks, and sustained engagement. Indeed, we are hosted today through the leadership of Professor Imran Valodia, the Southern Center for Inequality Studies here at VETS, that reflects our distinctive role as a globally engaged, research-intensive institution that connects ideas, scholars, and practice. We bring together scholarship, policy engagement, international collaboration on pressing topics du jour, allowing ideas to move between context and between evidence and action. Much of this depends on relationships that you have, and you are part of that relationship building across institutions, disciplines, countries, and continents. It is in spaces like this today that these relationships we seek to develop, where different perspectives can be brought into conversation in a structured and intellectual way. What connects this work is not the field, but the approach. That, I believe, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, is the role of university, which is why we're here. Not only to generate knowledge, transmit knowledge, which is our core business of a university, but also to create a space for engagement where ideas can be tested and begin to form practice. That's clearly why in my office of the Vice Chancellor, when I took over as a VC in 2021, Vice Chancellor is the President and Rector, to those that don't come from the Anglosphere. This is exactly why we established the Pro-Vice Chancellor in the Vice Chancellor's office. This is a portfolio focused on climate, sustainability, and equality, headed by Professor Valodia, to bring greater coherence to areas that are deeply interconnected in both cause and consequence, and to ensure that our work reflects that reality in a deliberate and sustained way within our context. It is a role we seek to play because of how we are positioned, grounded here, but consistently connected beyond it. As I conclude, please allow me to note that while we are delighted to host you here at the VETS Management Campus, this is one part of the broader university community. We look forward to engaging further with you and sharing more of what VETS can offer in this space. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, we are honored to welcome you today. We look forward to what looks like an incredible and pioneering set of deliberations ahead. Welcome to VETS. Bienvenue à VETS, Afrique du Sud, Johannesburg. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, VC, for those introductory words. So we're now going to shift straight on to the first panel that is a part of the program for today. And for that, I'm going to pass on to my colleague Wanga Zembe Mkabile, who is a kind of professor at the University of the Western Cape. She was also one of the members of the G20 committee that was appointed by President Ramaphosa, and is a member of the founding committee of the IPI. So, kind of over to you, Wanga.
Good day, colleagues. I also wish to just say, all protocol observed, given the different representations we have in the room. I first want to express my thanks to Professor Vilakazi for the warm welcome and for hosting us today. So today is such an honor and a privilege for me and the rest of the founding committee members. As Professor Valodi has just stated, I was part of the group of the 6 members of independent experts that our President Ramaphosa selected to write the Global Inequality Report as part of South Africa's G20 presidency. And so to have started at that point, produced the report, released it to, I think, great acclaim and fanfare in November last year, and having highlighted and really, centered the need for a more permanent structure beyond that G20 extraordinary committee that was formed, a more permanent structure that would then periodically report on and provide trustworthy evidence on inequality, and therefore influence and contribute to addressing it. So this International Panel on Inequality that we have since the G20 report on global inequality came out, we have then been busy for the last few months setting up this structure. We had a meeting in Switzerland, in Geneva in March, and now today feels even more significant for me, not only because it's happening at home in South Africa, but it's also another kind of coming home for the work that we've done for the report itself, since it was initiated by South Africa. So for us to be coming back here today, to spend these 2 days, to really now focus on the meat of what this new structure will comprise and what it will do and what it will be about, is a great privilege. So I'm now going to moderate this panel, this first panel of the day, which I'm also quite honored to moderate, because it includes our very esteemed colleagues, Ambassador Mauricio Lario from Brazil, who's the Secretary of Climate, Energy and Environment in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Brazil, and who's also been part of the G20 Sherpa for Brazil, as well as Mr. Henrik Habo from Norway, who also the Sherpa for both the G20 and within the Ministry of Home Affairs. And then finally, our very own Professor Jayati Ghosh, who's a former member of the independent experts on inequality, who wrote the report with me and others, but also is a professor of economics at the University of Massachusetts, what is the name? The University, Massachusetts in Amherst in the US, but also has been a professor and teacher in New Delhi, India. And so I'm going to call them up to come. We are all going to sit here and have this panel discussion. Testing, testing. Can everybody hear me? Yes. And maybe we should just
Yes.
quickly check that we all.
Yes.
I think it's working. Okay.
Testing. Yes.
Okay. Welcome, great panelists of this great panel. I think first, as a start, some ground rules. I'm going to be a very strict timekeeper, which means I need to get my phone. I'm going to be a very strict timekeeper, unfortunately, so please keep your responses to the allocated time. For the first round of questions, it's going to be 3 minutes per person.
3 minutes, okay.
And perhaps if you have 1 minute left, I'll sort of just say, so keep looking down for the signal, and then we'll do perhaps 2 minutes for the next and any other subsequent rounds that we are able to have. So I'm going to start with you, Ambassador.
Yes.
Let me set your first 3 minutes. So Brazil has been really important in not only, bringing attention to the problem of inequality, but in how it decided to use its G20 presidency in 2023, 2024 to focus on inequality, thereby really laying the groundwork for South Africa to come on and continue that work. I think it was such a sort of a special and perhaps even rare moment that you could have two countries sort of passing on the baton to each other to continue the momentum for a challenge like this. We know that currently, we're not in a situation where we are able to pass that on to the current G20 presidency. So you really did, as a country, essentially enabled us to be sitting here today, thinking about and talking about this international panel on inequality that we are forming. So given this, what do you think it means and it says that Brazil decided to prioritize and center inequality, and the fact that then South Africa was able to come on board, and that these two global South countries, which are also both part of BRICS, that we are making the stand, also given our own inequality profile in each of our countries? What do you think it means?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this meeting, of course, the hospitality of the university. Well, I think it was a happy coincidence, because when Brazil was the president of G20, we had in the Troika not only South Africa, but also India, because 23 was India, 24 Brazil, and 25 South Africa, the IPSA countries. And personally, President Lula was very much experienced in dealing with G20, because in his second term, he was, together with President Bush, launching, and other presidents, the first summit of G20 because of the financial crisis of 2008. And when we had discussions with him, with President Lula, about what would be the main topics for the Brazilian G20 presidency, he was very clear, and of course, with all that experience, he said, I want a G20 which is very much focused on few objectives, but very important ones. And the experience of Brazil led also to the idea of putting inequality as the leitmotif of G20, because Brazil is one of the most unequal countries in the world. We are improving. Now we have at last come close to the 0.5 index in Gini terms, right? Brazil was much higher than that, but we are having some progress as a result of some progressive countries. And this idea that we should put this on the center of the agenda was in President Lula's mind, because he said one of the basic inequalities in the world is the question of access to food. Mm-hmm. And Brazil, because of some conservative countries, was backtracking in terms of access to food. And he said, and at the same time, we have in the international agenda the concentration of income. Mm-hmm. If we discount China in the last decades, there was an increase of income concentration, and at the same time, G20 completely hijacked by geopolitical issues. Mm-hmm. We had, Zain was there, I was there in 23, the complete stalemate because of the Ukrainian issue, and President Lula said, this is impossible. We need to put again the social and economic issues at the center of G20. And why not putting the question of economic and social issues, the question of hunger and inequality, mm-hmm. the question of climate, and the governance, the management of global governance. So inequality was the issue that crossed all these mm-hmm. Issues. The question of inequality domestically, the access of food and income, mm-hmm. The question of climate, because the effects are very unequal, and the question of global governance, in which we have a concentration of power in some countries. So it was very clear in his mind that he wanted to make inequality as the center of G20. And of course, the happy coincidence was to have President Lula and President Ramaphosa in this, I would say, duo, leading this ahead. And we had the Declaration of Inequality, the first one, in G20 back in 2024. Excellent. Okay, sorry for exceeding my time.
Thank you. I'm going to have to be a lot more stricter. But thank you very much, Ambassador. I mean, I think that just demonstrates, you know, the importance of leadership.
Yes.
Yes. And if you have it at the highest level, where a world leader stands up and you know, makes that decision, it's very important. So for you, Jayati, having written the Global Inequality Report and having, you know, arrived at that conclusion that it's an emergency, that we have an inequality emergency, what do you think the report contributes? You know, what new story do you think we are telling through the report that perhaps we had not seen before in all the different iterations of the work on inequality that had happened, you know, before our report?
Well, yeah, thank you, Wanga, and what a privilege it is to be here. I really have to say that, you know, South Africa and Brazil have been an inspiration to all of us in the rest of the developing world. So thank you for doing this. Yes, so, you know, what we found is really that inequality is still a huge problem. The perception that it's come down largely because of China, the growth of incomes in China. Yet we find that 83% of countries are highly unequal, even according to World Bank data, and 90%, more than 90% of the world lives in these countries. So the world is still very unequal. But there were other aspects that I was also really surprised to learn. The dramatic increase in private wealth relative to public wealth. The fact that that private wealth then carries with it immense power and the ability to influence institutions, regulations, policies that in turn have huge impact on perpetuating inequalities. The impact that has in terms of our democracies, our societies, the polarization, the fracturing, the fact that the inability to even deal with climate breakdown. All of these are things that were even more, oh, sorry, can you hear me now? Yes. So all of these are things that we found even worse than we had expected. So I think one was, if you like, the extremity of the results of the inequality, and the fact that really it's a policy choice. That these are the results of actions taken by states, and therefore they can also be changed by states and by policies. We found international inequality also to be very important, essentially not just because of a colonial history, but because of continuing patterns in the international architecture that perpetuate that kind of power inequality as well. So for all of these reasons, I think we emphasized that this is something that the world has to take seriously in a way that they have not done before.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So in a sense, we brought that nuance, to the story of understanding inequality. Thank you. And so just actually continuing on from that, from the recognition of the report, of the importance of the international space in driving inequality, and then equally, therefore, in addressing it. What do you think, Mr. Habo, what do you think as Norway, a country that's far more equal, so you're not sitting in the situation that the three of us as countries are sitting in. The fact that you took such a clear stance on inequality at the G20, and you've continued as a country, Norway has continued to be quite clear, and an important ally, actually, even in our establishment of this international panel on inequality. What do you think this tells us, about what's possible in terms of communicating this message in a way that will get governments and world leaders to listen, to pay attention, just as you have as Norway?
Well, thank you very much for that challenging question, and also for being here. And I must start by thanking South Africa and the year before that Brazil for having invited Norway as guest country in G20. We are not a permanent member of G20, so luckily we've been part of this process for the last 2 years. And also that President Ramaphosa commissioned the Stiglitz report, which is the reason why we have this meeting today. The starting point is that inequality is, first of all, it's unfair. It undermines trust in democracies and institutions, and it leads to conflict. We see that both within countries and between countries. So this is definitely something we need to do something about. It's bad for society, and it's also bad for the economy. And that is something which is, I think, in our case, is helpful in convincing governments to deal with this. And we welcome very much that first Brazil and the Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty last year, or 24, and also the fact that Ramaphosa commissioned this report. I think that has definitely lifted the issue of inequality higher up on the international agenda. And as you said, the Norwegian Prime Minister actually made inequality a main point in his speech at the G20 summit in Johannesburg in November. So let me just quote him, because I think that's relevant for this discussion. And he said that inequality is the result of policy choices. I think you said something similar. And as such, it can be fought, including with progressive taxation, effective welfare system covering everyone, and not the least, measures that ensure equal opportunities for women and men. So this is a sort of a very compact version of why and what we actually have been doing in Norway. And furthermore, he said, we invest in equality because it improves the lives of our citizens and makes our economy stronger. So, and this has been sort of there's across the aisle agreement in the Norwegian political sphere about this. And I think the last part of the question was why should we deal with this in a situation of volatility? My answer to that is that it's even more important in situation of instability, because it is a driver of conflict. So if we address inequality efficiently, we will also reduce tension between countries and within countries.
Thank you. Right on time. So finally, I'm then going to just ask all of you, each of you, for 1 minute, which I will have to be very strict to keep. What do you think then, in us, the founding committee, the experts who've come alongside us to create this new structure that's going to look at inequality, where to from here? What sort of views and perspectives do you have for how this new international panel on inequality, how we expect it to address the problem of inequality? First with you, Ambassador.
Yes, well, the position of Brazil is that this should be at the center of the agenda, and the panel should play, I would say, a very influential role, as we have in the panel of climate change. The idea that this should be one issue of the international agenda, which seems nowadays a bit natural for this group, I would say well, faces incredible resistance from many countries. We were lucky to have the Declaration on Inequality on 24. Today it would be completely impossible.
Indeed.
So it's important to generate, I would say, political support and academic, I would say, of course, knowledge about this, because in the view of Brazil and some progressive governments, we need to tackle this, because it's not only a domestic issue, it's also an international issue, in the sense that the difference between countries, or the lives that matter, we are seeing that in the geopolitical context that we have, lives that matter more than others. This is a structural inequality that we should face in the international agenda. And why not having something dealing directly with this? That's
Thank you so much.
the view of Brazil.
Thank you, Ambassador. And you, Professor Fayati Bosch?
Yeah, I think, I'm old enough to remember before the IPCC became actually an important part of a player globally. And in fact, it was not common to recognize climate change as a big problem among policymakers and among people. And I think this will actually play a similar role, I'm hoping, that having a panel that puts it all out there, that puts in the different dimensions. I should mention also the fact of intersectionality, that it's not just about incomes, it's about also different access. It's about the ways in which it spreads by gender, as you noted, by ethnic category, by race, by caste in my own country, and so on, by location. The national and international aspects, the fact that some lives mean less than others, all of these will actually become part of public knowledge in a way that they're not so much today. And that is what is essential to make governments do something about it. So I think the panel is something that we need to actually bring it to the global agenda and to national agendas as well.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, so maybe sum up in 3 points. First of all, keep the issue of inequality high on the political international agenda. And I think President Lula, President Ramaphosa have contributed personally to do that. So that needs to be maintained. Secondly, that since it's very difficult these days to get sort of global consensus on agendas, that coalitions of the willing, progressive countries, this kind of grouping of countries who wants to do something, we work together. And then finally, with reference to the IPCC, that we help with solidly knowledge-based, academically grounded policy advice that can be translated into policies for our decision makers.
Thank you.
Globally and nationally.
Sorry?
Both at the global and the
Globally
national
and domestically, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you to our audience for having engaged with this very great panel. I am now going to actually not open up, unfortunately, the floor for any kind of questions because we're running out of time. Instead, I'm going to thank my panelists and then invite our Director General.
Zain? He left. He's with the president.
Oh, so could we ask more questions? Or not? Maybe not.
So I'm pleased to report that the president is here, but we do have a bit of time. So if you want to open it up to come to a few more questions, you can proceed on it.
Okay. Oh, there's somebody. Yes, please. Go for it. Yeah. Can we just have a mic there? Yeah. So audience members, please keep your questions very short and succinct, and our panelists, I also ask you to respond very sharply.
Thank you very much. My name is Amir from Oxfam, South Africa. My question is for the Norwegian counterpart. You started your speech by saying that inequality is unfair, but from the rest of the panel, we are hearing that the global north and developed countries generally resist towards this panel. Now, as a developed country in the global north, what role do you think Norway can play to convince other developed countries in the northern globe on changing their approach to something that is unfair? Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic question.
Well, a tricky question. So No, I think that we must just continue. I think we have the Nordic countries, not only Norway, we have shown that it's possible to have equality and good growth at the same time. So to make that case, and what is also important is to do that not only among this convinced group here, but really in the finance, ministers of finance circles. I think that's extremely important because these are who we have to convince at home. So we should stimulate a sort of more forward-leaning debate among our finance treasury colleagues.
Excellent. I think we can take one other question over there. Over. You have the mic already. Okay, the mic is already there. I will hopefully give you some time.
Thank you. It's a quick question to all the panelists. One of the most, sorry, my name is Mark Hayward. I'm from an organization called the Union Against Hunger in South Africa. One of the worst manifestations of inequality globally is access to food. The crisis of access to food is growing rapidly in the context of geopolitical events, climate crisis, and so on. And I would invite you all to just make a brief comment, not on what should be done about access to food in the mid and longer term, but what we should be doing in this room with all of these governments present here to mitigate the hunger crisis now. In South Africa, we have 20 million people who live on a spectrum of hunger. That's 1/3 of our population. We have 29% of our children stunted by the age of 5. We have 10,000 children who die every year because of malnutrition, indirectly or directly. So it's a very immediate crisis that will make inequality much, much worse if we don't act on it now. So I would just love to hear your thoughts on the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, literally, you sort of have to give really a one-word answer to that very, very broad question. I'll start with you, Ambassador.
Well, being very short, the solution would be the universalization of the public policies that worked to fight hunger. And Brazil has an experience because Brazil left the world hunger map of FAO twice. Because President Lula had to return in order to remove again Brazil from the hunger map. And this is a mix of public policies, income distribution policies in Brazil linked to some other public policies. The school meals program, which is really fantastic in Brazil, and it worked. And what we are doing is trying to universalize through the Global Alliance Against Hunger. We have a basket of policies that were approved by more than 120 countries through the work of G20. The Secretariat is in FAO now. We are almost over in completing the task, but the idea is to use the right public policies that were mainly done in developing countries, like Brazil, India, and some other countries that were very effective in fighting hunger. So it's not that expensive, to tell you honestly. In order to reduce from the 700 million people that face hunger nowadays, and plus 2.1 billion in food insecurity, it's not that expensive. The question is the political motivation.
Thank you, Ambassador. You've answered for all of us.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I wish we could engage further.
Okay, folks, on behalf of its university, I'd just like to officially welcome the President. President, it's always kind of a great pleasure for us to have you here. And I think we recognize the fact that you and President Lula, the Prime Minister of Norway and the President of Spain have been driving the international agenda to address inequality, and we thank you for your leadership on that. With that, I'm going to pass things on to the Director General of DIRCO. Zane Dango is going to officially welcome the President. Zane, over to you.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the Diplomatic Corps. And I'm doing this welcoming of the President in my capacity as his representative on the Permanent Panel on Inequality. So before I introduce the President, I think we also need to acknowledge they've been on the panel. You've mentioned it, the support that we've been getting from Brazil, Norway, and Spain. To acknowledge Maurizio Lirio, who was the G20 Sherpa, currently the BRIC Sherpa for his sons, Henrik Harbo, the Norwegian G20 Sherpa, and also Jose Domingo Rosello, who's the head of labor policy in President Sanchez's office. I think a special welcome to them is in order as well. So President Ramaphosa championed all elements of South Africa's G20 presidency and led from the front to ensure that it was a resounding success. One of the outcomes was the establishment of the G20 Extraordinary Committee of Independent Experts on Global Inequality. So this was the committee appointed by President Ramaphosa, chaired by Professor Stiglitz, with all of these wonderful people making up the panel. The report highlighted what is now called the inequality emergency and its impact on democracy, development, stability, and also dignity. And when Professor Stiglitz briefed President Ramaphosa in September 2025 on the margins of UNGA, Professor Stiglitz indicated to the President that one of the recommendations was the establishment of an international panel of inequality. I recall that the President immediately supported that recommendation. The committee's report was subsequently endorsed by the G20 members at the summit, those members present at the summit, and subsequently the report was also endorsed by the African Union and most recently endorsed by those heads of states that were present in the Defense for Democracy meeting convened by President Sanchez. So President Ramaphosa has led this from the front, and he will now give us the keynote address today, which is the second meeting of the committee. The first meeting having taken place in Geneva, and this is the second meeting, which is just a follow-on. And I think it's only fitting that President Ramaphosa opens this meeting. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Thank you. Let's be seated, please. Thank you, Director General Zane Dango, Professor Vilagazi, for welcoming me at the door and making me feel a little bit less anxious. I want to greet all members of the panel who have done incredible work on addressing this issue that is so important, not only to humanity, but to all countries in the world. And let me also extend my greetings to the ambassadors and high commissioners who are here, and representatives of civil society and academia, and also representatives of government. I'm sorry that I seem to have disrupted something that's wonderful that was taking place here by my unceremonious entry. So I apologize and forgive me. It is indeed a great honor and a pleasure, really, to participate in this Consultative Council meeting of the founding committee of the International Panel on Inequality. The decision to establish the panel is one of the most consequential outcomes of the G20 Leaders Summit held in Johannesburg last year. As you well know, we now, as South Africa, attend the G20 meetings just by rumor. Having been completely excluded, so it reminds me of a story of a young person who attended university. Professor Stiglitz, it was not this university, it was another university. And because education has become so accessible to young people, the classroom was almost always full. And they stood outside and listened through the windows. And the one student had to say, I now attend lectures by rumor. So we also do the same. We follow what is happening at the G20 by rumor. And this decision arose from an appreciation by leaders from across the world that this issue of inequality severely constrains social and economic development of peoples around the world. Indeed, inequality is one of the greatest threats to human progress. And we have seen it here in our own country as being the country that carries the highest burden of inequality in the world. It retards human development and progress because where inequality exists, opportunity is scarce. And many South Africans can attest to that. And where opportunity is scarce, the potential is wasted. And where potential is wasted, progress is not just slowed, but it is stopped. Inequality in the end entrenches poverty across generations. And we see it through lived experiences amongst our people, where poverty is passed on from one generation to another in households. It results in one's starting point in life being a handicap. This results in inferior schooling, inadequate nutrition, and the lack of networks that make upward mobility difficult or impossible. And this prevents humanity's progress in the end. Humanity cannot advance as long as vast swaths of people are denied the fundamental requirements of a decent life, being water, food, shelter, education, employment, security, and in the end, dignity. Humanity cannot advance when the talents, capabilities, creativity, and energy of billions of people remain untapped and their potential remains unrealized. By the same measure, humanity cannot advance in a world that is deeply unjust and where so many people are unable to exercise fundamental human rights that are due to them. It was to address this global crisis that I established the Extraordinary Committee on independent experts on global inequality as part of South Africa's G20 presidency. Under the leadership of Professor Joseph Stiglitz, the committee did extraordinary work. It produced a seminal report that will form the cornerstone of the global fight for equality into the future. Drawing on extensive evidence and a broad range of views, the report outlines in clear and precise terms the scale, the drivers and the consequences of rising inequality across the world. It is really astounding that between 2000 and 2024, the richest 1% of people in the world are said to have captured 41% of all new wealth. The poorer half of humanity captured just 1% of the new wealth that was created. The committee's report provided evidence that inequality is in the end a threat to democratic freedoms, to economic growth, and to general well-being of people. It would be a mistake to think that inequality is bad only for the poor. Inequality threatens the stability of societies and sustainability of economies. It worsens the effects of climate disasters, as they often happen to many countries, and steadily makes the planet less inhabitable for all people. The committee was correct when it said that the world is facing an inequality emergency. The International Panel on Inequality represents a concrete opportunity to confront this emergency. It is also an opportunity to bring together various key stakeholders, governments, and peoples from different countries to help the world to understand and address inequality. No nation in the end can overcome inequality alone. We have to work together. We need coordinated multilateral actions rooted in solidarity and shared responsibility to address this big challenge that the world is facing. We need a collective architecture of reform, credible monitoring, and actionable insights to guide governments, multilateral agencies, academia, and civil society. Since the publication of the G20 Inequality Report last year, the principles set out in the report have been endorsed by the African Union, which we are very pleased about. Several world leaders have embraced it. More than 700 economists and inequality experts and over 30 former world leaders have also embraced it. I would like to make special mention of those leaders who have been particularly supportive of the work towards the establishment of the panel. President of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, President Lula da Silva, President of Brazil, and the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Støre. The struggle against inequality featured prominently at the fourth meeting of the In Defense of Democracy initiative in Barcelona last year. Am I not audible enough? Am I in the right direction? So when we were in Barcelona, this received a great deal of support, not only from the leaders, but from the thousands of people who attended. At the meeting, leaders from across the world recognized that persistent inequality, social and economic political exclusion, and lack of opportunity create fertile ground for extremism, polarization, and the erosion of democracy. The leaders who were present welcomed coordination with international initiatives addressing inequality and social cohesion, specifically mentioning the International Panel on Inequality presented during the South African G20 presidency. The panel will therefore begin its work amid a gathering groundswell of global activism for a more inclusive, equal, and just world. And this fills us with a great deal of pleasure. because we can see that it is gathering momentum. And it will provide the rigorous analysis and credible evidence that is needed to ensure that this sentiment is really translated into actions that fundamentally and substantially reduce inequality within and between countries. That is why the work of this consultative council is so important. All those gathered here from South Africa and across the world are expected to propose an agenda for the first wave of work of the International Panel on Inequality. The Consultative Council is expected to identify the critical areas for focus within 4 key themes taken from the original report: the scale and dimensions of inequality, the drivers of inequality, the consequences of inequality, and finally, the various policy options that should be adopted. We expect the consultative conference to deliberate on the gaps in our knowledge in these areas and prioritize the key questions that we need to answer to, so that we can address the gaps that still exist. So I'd like to thank the experts who are attending this conference in person, and to those who will be participating virtually as well. Thank you once again for sharing your time, your expertise, and your passion. We have embarked on what I regard as a very important journey of getting the world to address what we knew was a major problem to humanity, but we hadn't paid global attention to it. So we encourage all world leaders and all governments to actively support the establishment of the panel as a permanent international body. Once established, once equipped and supported, this international panel will be one of the most effective instruments the global community has to direct efforts to sustainably reduce inequality. But we must recognize that the panel can only take us so far. As communities, as social formations, and as governments, and as multilateral institutions, in the end, it is up to us to take forward the struggle for more equal societies and for a just and inclusive global order. The panel can provide the evidence that we need. It can develop the analysis to make the policy recommendations that are needed. But it is up to all of us to act, and to act together, and to act with great urgency to address the scourge of inequality. At a domestic level, countries need to be investing in education, in health of their people, prioritizing the needs of the poorest and most vulnerable. They need to provide quality public goods and services that improve living conditions and create opportunities for people. Laws, policies, and regulations are needed to protect workers, to constrain excessive corporate power, to create employment, to safeguard the environment, and to ensure that taxation is progressive and also redistributive. At a global level, we need to transform the rules and institutions of global financial governance to direct their resources towards the needs and circumstances of developing economies. As South Africa, we have called on these institutions to be reformed. We've been quite vocal in terms of calling for not only the reform of financial institutions, but all multilateral institutions, including the United Nations Security Council itself. The commitments that have been made towards those countries that bear the burden of global warming needs to be fulfilled and further enhanced. If we are to overcome global inequality, developing economies need to have the space, but also to have the means and the capability to undertake just energy transitions and appropriate to their national development plans. Just as inequality fuels conflict, so conflict also deepens inequality, as many of us will notice. It is therefore of utmost importance that the global community rallies around efforts to resolve conflicts that are raging around the world, that are today afflicting the world, and not only those countries that are involved in conflicts. And we should, through this various efforts, put in place credible mechanisms to, in the future and now as well, prevent conflicts. We need to restore the UN Charter to its rightful place at the center of international relations, and to reform institutions like the UN Security Council so that they can be more reliable guarantors of peace. We established this international panel knowing that inequality is deepening. We do so out of great concern for the quality of lives of billions of people and the prospects of meaningful human progress around the world. Yet, although the challenges are great, we see a rising tide of activism and a renewed determination across the world to confront as well as to overcome this crisis of inequality. As we undertake the important preparatory work to put this panel in place, we are full of hope and expectation. We are convinced that through our collective efforts, we are indeed firmly on the path towards a better, more just, and a more equal world. The efforts that we are involved in now may seem meaningless and may seem too little. But as they say, better late than never. And it is better to do it now so that we can address this scourge of inequality. So thank you very much to all of you for being here. Thank you.
So I'd like to now ask, kind of ask the DG of DIRCO, kind of Zane Dango, kind of to please do an official vote of thanks to the President, but also at the same time to kind of introduce kind of a message of support that we have from the UN General Assembly. That's a bad mistake. From the UN Secretary General, apologies for that. So let me pass it on to that.
Thank you very much, Imran. Mr. President, on behalf of the panel members, the academics, the government representatives, the Secretariat, and all those present, we'd like to warmly thank you for giving us that address. And can we give the President a hand? The President has pointed out in his own address, this inequality emergency requires a new form of activism that spans governments, academics, civil society, trade unions, and others. In addition, it calls for a new kind of multilateralism, and it requires a global and networked approach if we are going to actually deal with this emergency. And it's therefore a good thing that Mr. Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, is also one of the supporters the President spoke about in his address. In 2020, at the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture, he actually warned that the rising tide of inequality will sink us all, and this work today is the action against that rising tide. So I think it's fitting that we will now watch and listen to a video message from the UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres. Can I just say before, immediately after the video, there'll be a photo up, and I understand that it's the people sitting in the first rows that will join the President for that photo opportunity, but we will be guided by those who have special responsibility for photos. Thanks. Thank you.
Excellencies, dear friends, I send my warm greetings as you gather in Johannesburg to further discuss a proposed international panel on inequality. I commend South Africa for its leadership in spotlighting the global inequality emergency. Around the world, inequality is driving so many of today's crises, eroding trust, deepening polarization, and destabilizing economies. Consider the facts. The top 1% holds 43% of global financial assets. And last year alone, the richest 500 individuals added $2.2 trillion to their fortunes. Increasingly, we see a world where the ultra-wealthiest and the companies they control are calling the shots like never before. They are wielding outsized influence over economies, information, and even the rules that govern us all. But let's be clear, inequality is not only about income or wealth, it's about power, who holds it, who is denied it, and how it shapes every chance in life. We face a world in which billions lack the basics, while a few reap extraordinary gains. A world where unfair global rules trap countries into patterns of vulnerability and dependence. A world where unequal outcomes today lock in unequal opportunities tomorrow, in education, in healthcare, in every aspect of life. And the emerging technologies are accelerating the divide. It does not have to be this way. We can and we must confront the injustice of inequality. It is essential for a future of dignity and sustainability for all. Thank you for your commitment to that vital mission.
everybody, if you could take a seat, and we welcome Professor Valodia to moderate the second panel, in which there will be a video from Professor Stiglitz. Thank you, Imran.
Hi, can I ask you to settle down so we can move on to the next panel? Hi, everyone. So my name's Imran Valodia, but since this is the fourth time I'm introducing myself, I guess you've worked that one out. So we're going to move straight on to the second panel that is going to shift the focus somewhat. Kind of in the first panel, the focus was much more kind of on the report and on the need for the establishment of an institution that I think we've now all kind of referring to as the International Panel on Inequality. The panel that we're having now is really a bit of a forward-looking kind of view, and we want to get the perspectives of those who've been kind of involved in the process to share with you some of their thoughts around what the International Panel on Inequality might be, what it might look like, what it might do. I think for those of us who've been on the G20 panel and who've been members of the founding committee, I think one of the most valuable experiences we've all had is to be thinking kind of about these issues and working with kind of all of the challenges, kind of under the leadership of a Nobel laureate, and to work under the leadership of Professor Joe Stiglitz. I think Professor Stiglitz would have loved nothing more than to be here with us today, and he wanted personally to share his great regret that he can't be here with us today. If you haven't yet been informed, unfortunately, Professor Stiglitz kind of has an infection and has been advised by his medical team that it would not be advisable for him to undertake the travel from New York to Johannesburg. But being Joe and being so committed to this process, not only is he joining us online, but he has also kind of prepared a pre-recorded message that he wanted to share with all of us. So I think before I move on to the panel, and since in our original planning, Professor Stiglitz would have been a member of the panel, I think it would be appropriate for us to start with the message from Professor Stiglitz. So I hope someone is going to make that video appear.
I have mixed feelings about making this recording. On the one hand, I am very sorry not to be with you today. And on the other hand, I am so pleased that such an important group of people are gathered to make real progress on addressing the inequality crisis. I know that the team we have built around the Founding Committee on the International Panel of Inequality will allow us to make great advancements in these days. A third of a century ago, I was asked to become a lead author of the second assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which was the first assessment to address the relevant economic issues. My experience was exhilarating. A group of academics working hard to understand a complex subject of global importance on which research had just begun. Our report, published in 1995, had, I believe, enormous influence in helping guide public responses, a view shared by the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, which awarded the IPCC, together with Al Gore, the 2007 Peace Prize. Today, we face multiple interlocking crises, including the climate and inequality crisis. President Ramaphosa recognized this, and as chair of the G20 asked me to chair a commission of leading experts to study and report back on inequality's various dimensions. This would be the first ever G20 report focused on inequality. Thank you again, Mr. President, Zane Dangar, and South Africa for this honor. Our committee got to work while highlighting alarming trends, discussing the multiple dimensions and common drivers, and the multifaceted consequences of today's inequality. Our committee concluded that what was needed was an international panel, like the IPCC, that would address these issues on an ongoing basis. The reception to our report exceeded our greatest hopes. It included more than 600 news items published in 75 countries and extensive coverage in major international outlets. Not surprisingly, given some of the glaring statistics, the richest 1% captured 41% of the new wealth since the year 2000, while the bottom 50% of humanity has increased its wealth by just 1%. Moreover, the world seems to be moving to an inherited plutocracy. $70 trillion of wealth is expected to be handed down to heirs over the coming decade. The outstanding response was understandable given not only the magnitude of the inequality, but the growing awareness of its adverse economic and political consequences. We were heartened, too, by the response to our major proposed initiative, the creation of the International Panel on Inequality. Over 700 economists and other inequality experts worldwide expressed support. Some of the leading research institutions offered to lend support to the work of the IPI, including the Southern Center for Inequality Studies at Wix. One of our hosts today, Professor Imran Valodia, is a vital member of our founding committee, and I am grateful to all of you who have traveled or tackled time zones to join the deliberations today. Of course, if the work of the IPI is to have the influence that we hope it will, political support is essential. I want to pay tribute to the leadership and leaders of South Africa in putting the IPI on the global stage. In collaboration with Spain and Brazil and now Norway, you are working hard to bring the IPI into being. The recent passage of South Africa's resolution at the Africa Union backing the IPI, and now the backing of 22 countries at the Democracy Summit last week in Barcelona, shows we have real momentum. It means the world for this initiative to have the support of the UN Secretary General, alongside leaders of other UN entities, not least our own Winnie of the UN AIDS. I could go on, but the point should be clear. We are serious about creating the IPI, and I believe this is the right time. The world needs more multilateral cooperation. It needs more policy making for the common good, needs more respect for the evidence and facts, and I believe the IPI will help all governments to achieve this. I will conclude with a word about our current moment. It should not be lost on us that leadership and cooperation are fostered in the most turbulent and challenging times. The UN itself was founded amid World War II, and now we are in the middle of another period of profound global instability as we work to found the IPI. So allow me to end with an invitation to all governments, academics, and civil society here today. I ask for your full support for the International Panel on Inequality. A scientific-based IPI with academic credibility but political salience will not only help to address inequality, one of the true challenges of the world today, but will also help to alleviate suffering of peoples across the world. It will also signal that we can assert multilateralism when it is under attack, and that we can work together to address the multiple crises we currently face. Thank you again for this opportunity to address you. Best wishes for all of us in these deliberations.
So we're going to move straight on to the second panel, and I have an extremely illustrious panel who I'm going to ask to kind of join me on stage as I introduce them. So our first panelist is Ms. Winnie Byanyima, who is the Executive Director of UNAIDS. She's kind of Undersecretary General at the UN. She's the convener of the Global Council on Inequality, AIDS, and Pandemics that I have the great honor to serve under her leadership. But most importantly, she's a member of the founding committee of the IPI. So Winnie, fantastic to have you here at this university. Our second panelist is Jose Domingo, works at the highest levels of the government of Spain, where is head of the unit on macroeconomic and labor policies in the cabinet of Prime Minister Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain. Jose, it's great to have you here. Please. Our third panelist is Adriana Abdener, who's a Brazilian social scientist. She's former special advisor on international affairs in the office of President Lula of Brazil. She's the co-founder of a leading Brazilian think tank called that's called Plataforma, and is currently the co-president of the Global Fund for a New Economy. As I said, the focus of the panel is really to try to share with you some perspectives, looking into the future. So I'm going to start with you, Winnie, because I've learned that I should always start with you, and ask you to talk us through why you think the G20 report, which we prepared, and which President Ramaphosa referred to as the inequality emergency that has to be dealt with, why kind of why do you think it's an emergency, and how could a panel such as the IPI kind of actually help to deal with this challenge of inequality? Kind of over to you, Winnie.
Thank you, Imran. It's an honor to be here, and good morning, friends. We have heard the shocking evidence from our report, an alarming increase in incomes and wealth at the top. Can you hear me? Not so well.
Maybe.
Can we just sort out the mic there?
Is this better? Not yet. Thanks, Imran, for the kind introduction. Greetings, good morning, friends. You've heard the evidence from our report that there's an alarming increase of incomes and wealth at the top. And more recent events, since COVID, the war in Ukraine, the trade wars that are going on, all this is driving inequality. Inequality is growing even faster. That's why we've called it an inequality emergency. 1 in 4 people skipping meals regularly as billionaires maximize for themselves. We are almost having, I think, a trillionaire, almost. This consolidation of wealth is also resulting in consolidation of power, concentration of power in a few hands, undermining democracies worldwide. So we are proposing the IPI, and you ask, how will the IPI solve this? Well, first, we are not proposing an advocacy platform, a campaign platform. That would be good for me. I'm a campaigner. But we were inspired, as you heard Professor Stiglitz say, by the role that the IPCC has played, the International Panel on Climate Change. A panel of international experts from all over the world who have helped by putting out reports regularly on tracking climate change and proposing and assessing what is driving it and proposing policy solutions. This is what we hope to achieve with the IPI. You might say the IPCC has not ended, has not stopped global warming. I'd say yes, it hasn't, but it has contributed to putting the problematizing, putting it on the table, showing policymakers what is driving it and what can slow its climate change. So equally, we want the IPI to do the same for inequality. Inequality remains really the elephant in the room for policymakers. They talk around it, they talk about its consequences, but they do not address it head on. This is what we want IPI to do. Put the evidence on the table for policymakers to address it.
Great, thank you so much, Winnie. That's a kind of a perfect segue into my first question for you, Adriana, which is to ask you to help us imagine the IPI in action. So what is your vision for what the IPI would actually deliver to the world? What would it do? Who's going to be on it? What's its work program going to be, and so on? So please imagine this for us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to South Africa And it's very wonderful to be back at WITS. I co-taught courses here during the winter 20 years ago, and it's a very special place for me. So I think we can imagine the IPI as having two kinds of function. The first one is political, because the topic of inequality has emerged here and there on the international agenda, but we need a hook to hang this coat. Otherwise, it will be put away over and over. And so providing this permanent space where we can come together, analyze, discuss, and propose solutions is a very important political function. At the technical level, the panel will bring together leading thinkers, academics, specialists, and others to think through, first of all, the drivers of inequality, which, as Jayati has mentioned, include not only the legacy of colonialism, but very contemporary problems, such as an international financial architecture that is deeply regressive, to mention just one problem. It will also come together to assess the scale, the dynamics, and the trends in inequality, not just wealth inequality, but its other dimensions, including things like gender and race, which to our countries, among others, is so important. And it will also come together to provide evidence on the consequences of this escalating wealth and other types of inequality. To finalize, the panel will help to identify major gaps in data, which are very important, especially when we're talking about wealth inequality, and in methodologies for the analysis. But also, as has been pointed before, in pointing the path towards solutions, because there are proven solutions for inequality, and also we can imagine new solutions. Countries are not required, as in the climate space, to have national plans on inequality, but perhaps we can dream of a day when our countries will, their heads of state will call our ministers together to assess our public policies and their impacts on inequality. And maybe one day, our regional organizations will come together to generate regional plans on inequality. It doesn't hurt to dream. Thank you.
Jose, you've worked sort of really closely with Prime Minister Sanchez of Spain, who has been championing the kind of establishment of the International Panel on Inequality. What's the case for governments to be supporting the establishment of the IPI, and what are the sorts of things that you think governments can gain from having an institution such as the IPI?
Thank you so much, Imran, Professor. Thank you so much to my predecessors in the interventions. Thank you. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to transmit the impression of the Spanish government. Responding on the question, I think it's a matter of legitimacy and institutionalization. The history of the progress of the humankind is the history of the progress of its institution, probably. So, by having the IPI, what we have is an institution where it's quite well defined what inequality is, who takes care of analyzing the drivers and the consequences of inequality, and which what the most successful policies are implemented. So it is not anymore a matter of preferences, it is a matter of how a problem is diagnosed, studied, and tackled. What has a government, what is the advantage of a government or having something like that, not to lose time in sterile discussion, trying to convince the other that there is a problem that should be addressed. That task is resolved through the establishment of international policy, International Panel of Inequality. The example of what IPCC has made is very interesting because it has designed and put in the center of the policies of all the governments a series of diagnosis and measurement. And for all, to finish, something very important for the governments. First of all, giving its people hope. And second of all, recovering legitimacy. This is very important. Governments can do something about actual people problems. This is essential for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jose. Coming back to you, Winnie, you have a kind of lots of experience in how kind of expertise and processes of this sort that we dream about in kind of in the IPI might work in practice. Because with Professor Joe Stiglitz, you also lead the Global Council on Inequality, AIDS, and Pandemics. And if I can just kind of highlight that council has also produced a report last year, which I would highly recommend that you download and read. But that report shows the kind of how inequalities in health are really kind of exposing us all to kind of to risks of many more pandemics. So what are the lessons from that report, both for how we should think about the IPI, but also since we're in South Africa, what might be some of the lessons of that report for South Africa?
Well, thank you. Inequality is something that I'm so attracted to, like a magnet. You know, I like to fight it. 20 years ago, Imran and I were working on gender inequality, growth, and poverty reduction, looking at that. So but now, from UNAIDS, I lead UNAIDS, we convened 21 experts in economics, in public health, in law, inequality, to reflect on inequality, pandemics, and HIV/AIDS, which we work on. 2 years of work. They looked at about 1,500 studies. They conducted their own research. The team was led by Professor Stiglitz and former First Lady Monica Gengos of Namibia, and Professor Samaiko Marmot from London University. This team, its major conclusion was that pandemic preparedness is failing in many countries because there's something, a key element we don't see, which we called the inequality pandemics cycle. That inequality fuels vulnerability to diseases. And then it makes outbreaks, disease outbreaks, longer and more deadly. And then that drives more inequality. So you have that cycle. And unless you break it, you continue to have one pandemic after another. Then there were two elements to this cycle: inequalities within countries and inequalities between countries. Between countries, the big inequalities driving this cycle are the intellectual property monopolies, that pharmaceutical companies can hide behind intellectual property rules, high prices of life-saving medicines, and deny them to many people. That we saw during COVID. It was President Ramaphosa who called it vaccine apartheid. So you see that many diseases continue, pandemics continue breaking out because we do not share technology. Secondly, if you look at HIV, it's concentrated here in sub-Saharan Africa. Here, 90% of the countries with the highest burden of HIV are also highly indebted countries, either ranked as in debt distress or at high risk of debt distress. The question of debt, the failure of the world to have a mechanism to resolve debt quickly, effectively, traps these countries in cycles of pandemics. They are putting more, 2 out of 3 countries here in this region are paying 4 times more towards debt servicing than to the health of their people. So these are the inequalities that between countries driving pandemics. And within countries, we also see from our evidence on HIV that highly unequal countries have not got, are not as effective in their HIV responses. They have lower rates of testing and treatment, higher rates of infections and deaths, and yet this cycle can be broken. We also see countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Zimbabwe, have been able to launch strong responses in their urban areas such that rich and poor people in those countries, in their urban areas, have the same rates of HIV infections because of the responses they have launched. So we have solutions and we propose solutions in that report. For South Africa, this is an amazing country, the most unequal country in the world, yet we can see from the side of diseases that such huge efforts have been put into fighting pandemics, such that when COVID hit, it was this country we were learning from about an effective COVID response. Why? Because it had been fighting HIV and doing the right things of narrowing inequality so that all those who are at risk get what they need. That is from that we're able to learn about responding to HIV, to COVID. We learned from South Africa.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Winnie. That makes me really proud to be South African. Kind of back to you, Adriana. We've mentioned the role of experts and kind of academics. Kind of Jose helped us to think through some of the kind of issues about the role of governments and the IPI. But I think we would all kind of accept that that without social movements and kind of organizations inside our communities, and not only is kind of progress going to be slow, but also that there's a huge amount of expertise kind of on inequality in kind of social movements and community organizations. So what role do you see for social movements and kind of organizations in communities in the kind of in the IPI and kind of in the fight against inequality?
Thank you, Imran. That's a great question. So first, I'd like to say that when President Ramaphosa put together our committee last year, of which I'm very honored to have been a part of, he was very wise because he made sure that the 6 of us, there are only 6 of us, came from different areas and different disciplines. And so we've had this very enriching experience of working with economists, with sociologists, with health experts. And it's been, I think, very important for us to develop an interdisciplinary perspective on inequality, because inequality is not just an economic issue. And the price of inequality is not just economic, it's social, it's political, it's an issue of justice. And that's also why throughout our work, the last year and this year, we've grown very conscious that we also need to go beyond strictly academic expertise. And I say this as someone who was also from academia as a professor. But in my home country in Brazil, the knowledge and the experience of inequality cannot be constrained to academia. We need social movements, we need trade unions, we need civil society, because they are very deep, knowledgeable repositories, not only of the problems of inequality, but also how to tackle it. So we need to come up with ways to harness this and to make sure that the knowledge that is produced is presented to decision makers, that it doesn't just exist in a bubble, whether academic or civil society or social movements, that it becomes integrated into the decision-making process. And if the launch of the IPI helps us to do that, to acquire that multidisciplinary, enriching perspective rather than collapsing inequality into a single indicator like we used to do with Gini Index, then I think it will have accomplished its goal. Thank you.
Can Jose, my last formal question, it's quite easy in the world we're in, and with the state of the world, and with kind of all of the attacks on multilateral institutions, with kind of all of the attacks on kind of organizations that are fighting for a more equal world, to feel pretty despondent about the world. Kind of under the leadership of your Prime Minister, last week in kind of in Spain, kind of I thought there was a pretty historic convening of kind of leaders of countries we would think of as progressive. Can you share with us kind of some of the discussions at the kind of at the conference in Spain last week, and some of the reasons why kind of Prime Minister Sanchez had led that initiative?
Well, I think that the event of the last weekend, what supposes is the initial movement, politically speaking and multilaterally speaking, is the multilateral germ of what needs to be a political movement among countries. It's like the initial rally, we test the momentum, and we start to walk. It's like, well, I like to use a sport metaphor here. No? We have the scoreboard, we have the rule book, and now we are going to start the game, and we are going to fight and play the game until the end. And this is very essential. I mean, this is materialization in the Declaration of Barcelona, which is an actual paper with principles, with direction in which act. And I think this is the perhaps not the ideal. We will get to the ideal when we get this international panel of inequality properly conformed and funded and instituted. But this is the initial of the political process needed to get there. And for me, this is essential. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. So we're at a university, which means I can't close the panel without giving you an opportunity to ask some questions. But we are pressed for time, so I'm going to restrict it to 2 questions, because we're standing between you and lunch. And I want to allow 1 question from the right-hand side of the room as I see it, and I'll take one from the left-hand side of the room kind of as I see it. So let's take a question there from Olivier.
Thank you.
I'll just give you this one.
Thank you very much, Imra, and a very warm welcome to all. My name is Olivier de Scuter. I'm the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, and very delighted also to be with you on the board of UNRIST, represented here by Magdalena Sepulveda. I would like to ask whether the work of the International Panel on Inequality could also incorporate perhaps more on the transition to a low-carbon economy to address not only the inequality emergency, but also the climate and biodiversity emergencies. We have usually been thinking of reducing poverty and inequality by a very simple sequence, which is to grow, to tax, and then to redistribute. But there is a larger panoply of options we may have to explore if we want to reduce the tension between economic growth on one hand and environmental collapse on the other hand. And I hope that we can do this together. The day before yesterday, we released in Geneva the roadmap for eradicating poverty beyond growth, showing that there are large number of measures that could be adopted to tackle that complex equation. And I think it's really important that we be more imaginative in those proposals so that we don't continue to see growth as the condition sine qua non for social progress. Thank you.
Great, so let's take one from this side of the room. It would be especially good to get a woman ask a question from the side. Anyone? No takers? I'm going to come back to the side then. Anyone else? Okay, none. Thank you. Let's go to some responses from the panel. We'll start with you, Jose, and then work towards Winnie.
I prefer to lead the initiative to someone else while I reflect on the intervention, if it's possible.
All right, Adriana?
Thank you for your question, Olivier. So those of us who worked on the report, we discussed this, and there's clearly a two-way relationship between climate and the ecological crisis, which includes biodiversity as well as pollution, contamination, and inequality. So we all very often speak, especially now COP-related spaces, that climate affects disproportionately those who are at the bottom of the pyramid and those who are more vulnerable, right? But it also goes that when you have context of high inequality, that feeds back into the loop of climate emergency, not only because those at the top, including many of us here in this room, have very high footprints, climate footprints, biodiversity footprints, pollution footprints, contamination footprints, but also because the research shows us that highly unequal contexts tend to lead to disproportionate investments in high carbon and high biodiversity loss endeavors. And so we need to break the cycle in both directions. And the good news is, if there's this vicious cycle going on, if we're able to break the cycle, then we can attack both inequality and, if you like, I don't like the term triple ecological crisis because it leaves people out, but we can also address that problem. On growth, it's wonderful to us to see that there's so much momentum behind going beyond simple indicators of economic growth to recognize that well-being, dignity, solidarity, and other forms of capturing the human experience and the planetary well-being are being incorporated into indicators. We need to normalize them. We need to mainstream them in countries, in institutions, and in the work that we do. Thank you.
Over to you, Winnie.
Yeah, I want to agree very much with Adriana. I think the IPI, my thinking about it is that if it is really going to be to shift the needle, we will not only think about redistribution within the system, but transforming the system itself. And that means, for me, if listening to you, Olivier, two things. One, challenging the notion of of growth itself, growth for growth's sake, that we cannot continue consuming the way we are. The production of goods and services and the waste that comes with it. So putting some limit, thinking about growth differently. So putting a challenge on this, and I would want to see the IPI really connecting economic inequality with this notion that is also driving the damage to our planet, the limitless growth. Then secondly, also the question of how our resources, global resources, are managed. That we think only through either the state regulating or the private sector managing resources. But then there are also other ways that resources are better managed by communities. The kind of thinking about community ownership and management of our natural resources. These are things that are still on the margin, but that should be core, mainstream thinking, that you can manage resources not by the state, not by the private sector, but by communities even better, and you'll be more long-term and more just, and not just profit-seeking or state regulation top-bottom. So I would like to see this panel take us out of the dominant economic development thinking so that then we can see solutions. But I don't. This is just me thinking.
Jose?
First of all, apologies to my collaborators in this panel because I throw them under the bus. I didn't expect the question. Sorry about that, Olivier. I am ready now. Try to say something coherent. I think the problem with inequality is linked to the change of paradigm that comes after globalization. After the 70s, the world thought that through the generalization of economic growth or GDP, all the problem of the humanity will take care of themselves, basically. And that didn't work as expected. That used to happen. We discovered that industrial growth brings externalities as deterioration of climate and put in risk the mere possibility of living on Earth. We learned as well that something like so strange that a living whale with his baby whale swimming in the ocean has an economic value. A whale has only economic value when it's properly dead, sell, and process. Obviously, this creates a problem. Inequality is the third generation, we can say, of discovering these externalities, negative externalities of the previous economic model. So for me, IPI is the needed evolution in economic governance and as well in economic thought. It's more complete, more extensive, takes into account a lot more things that are relevant. So it's what the humankind is doing since we started, progress for the majority, which is the ultimate measure of when we are things well. So thank you so much. Thank you so much to both.
So this brings to an end this brings to an end the second panel for today. Please, can I ask you to join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their views with us. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
brings... So that also brings to the end kind of the formal public proceedings for today. The members of the founding committee and our consultative committee will be spending the next day and a half here at Wits University kind of really thinking through kind of the design and the program of work kind of and the establishment of the IPI. So do look out for our announcements kind of on that. It's my job also to thank all of those who have made it possible for us to kind of to have this event today. If I'm going to single out the kind of the individuals, then I'm going to miss someone, and I'm going to kind of to cause offense. So I'm going to stick to the institutions. I think this has been kind of a fantastic collaboration between a huge team kind of at the University of the Witwatersrand, from the Vice-Chancellor's team to kind of our events team. So thank you to everyone from the WITS team for making it possible for us to have today. Kind of a huge amount of effort has been done by the team kind of at the Southern Center for Inequality Studies, so I'd just like formally to also acknowledge their role. Of course, none of this would have happened without all of the hard work of the Secretariat, of the founding committee of the IPI. So thank you so much to the Secretariat. So I'd just like to make a few closing remarks before inviting you to to join us for a cocktail lunch. I think it would be kind of appropriate for me to re-emphasize the point that's been made in our report that the President highlighted today, and that many of our speakers have mentioned as well, that we do indeed have an emergency inequality, and it's really, really important for us to start to address the issue. Not only does it corrode our economies, but it really also undermines our democracies. It hampers economic development, and it's really destructive for the sovereignty of countries in the global south. And I think you would all agree that it's kind of really important for us to address this. I think, as the UN Secretary General shared with us, kind of inequality is not simply an issue about income and wealth. It's really an issue of power, and I think it's about time that this issue is addressed across the world. I think, as Professor Joe Stiglitz highlighted in his address, and as he's reminded us often in all of the work that we've done under his leadership, that really we have a choice about this. It is not inevitable that we should have such high levels of inequality. And kind of across the world, we have a choice kind of about whether we allow this to continue or whether we kind of really start to address it. And I think in kind of all of the remarks that we've had today from governments, from the experts in kind of in the academy, and from those of us who are here from civil society, I think everyone has kind of emphasized that we do have a choice here, and I think this kind of wholeheartedly speaks to the core idea of the IPI, and I would invite you all kind of to support the establishment of the IPI, and to and to help us to progress this agenda to to address the emergency. As we've kind of highlighted, we have a huge amount of evidence. We have a huge amount of analysis. And I think, as Jose reminded us, we have a momentum that is starting to build, and kind of really it's the it's the time for action to now start to address this. I think on behalf of its university, I'd like to just stress kind of how thrilled we are that the design thinking about kind of at the IPO, kind of about the IPI, kind of is happening here in Johannesburg, kind of in South Africa, and kind of at Wits University. Because as our Vice Chancellor kind of emphasized, it's really kind of in our DNA to kind of use kind of all of the challenges that we have to deal with in societies such as ours in the Global South, to kind of address these issues. And I think it's kind of hugely of huge symbolic importance that the design work is being done kind of inside kind of a country in the Global South, and with a Global South perspective, really at the kind of at the core of how we think about it. We're also thrilled to have hosted you all here today, and to host and to have hosted the President. Lunch now awaits, so please join us for lunch. Our team outside will guide you to the lunch. We'd like it to be quite informal, so please feel free to chat to each other kind of over the lunch. And thank you all again for joining us here today.